Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Open Mind, a community lecture and film series that brings together thought leaders in science and culture for meaningful discussions about mental health issues, sponsored by UCLA's Friends of the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior and the Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital Board of Advisors. I'm AJ Mendez, Friends of Semel board member. Welcome to today's program featuring clips and discussion about the award-winning documentary, Just Like You, Anxiety and Depression, about youth mental health. We're honored to have with us Jen Greenstreet, founder and executive producer of Just Like You Films, Ryan Lefebvre, announcer for Major League Baseball's Kansas City Royals, who appears in the film, and Dr. Artha Gillis, health sciences assistant clinical professor at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. Dr. Gillis is triple board certified in adult, child and adolescent, and forensic psychiatry. We'd like to thank our guests for taking the time to share their insights, knowledge, and expertise with us. Before we get started, just a few notes. Our program runs about an hour and 15 minutes, with the last segment reserved for your questions. If you have a question, type it in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, not the chat, and we'll get to as many as possible. Today's program is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, which you can find on our website, www.friendsofthesemelinstitute.org. There's also a library of past open minds, a calendar of upcoming events, information about the Friends Research Scholar Program, the Open Mind Film Festival for high school students, and a donation link. We hope you'll consider supporting. And now, please welcome Jen Greenstreet, Ryan Lefebvre, and Dr. Artha Gillis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Greenstreet, and I'm the filmmaker, and I'm thrilled to be here this evening to talk to you about this labor of love, Just Like You, Anxiety and Depression, a feature-length documentary film. I actually began my professional career as a prosecuting attorney. I practiced law for about 8 years, and I continue to be an advocate through film, and we've been making films at Just Like You for 15 years, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit filmmaking company, and our purpose is to create film that will help kids and adults help us all create a kinder world through the power of film. And we've made films on different topics: burns, Down syndrome, autism, facial anomalies, type 1 diabetes, and now anxiety and depression. And I'm so excited to be here to share it with you. They asked me to talk about how I came about to make this film, right? How the process in making this film. And actually, it began with a lunch that I had with a dear friend, and she asked me if I would ever consider making a film about anxiety disorder and depression. And I said, of course. That's how we get ideas for our films. They just kind of organically come to us. But I said, we've only ever made films about medical conditions, so making a movie about anxiety disorders and depression would be a shift for us. And she kind of looked at me and said, that is exactly why we need to make this film, because anxiety disorders and depression are medical conditions, and you're not the only one that doesn't understand that. So, and it became apparent to me over the course of producing this film very quickly that this film is so needed, that 500 million people live with anxiety disorder and depression all over the world, according to the World Health Organization, and the CDC reports that they're one of the leading causes of death by suicide. And the Mayo Clinic says that the stigma surrounding these events or these conditions, like the one that I held, that they weren't actually real medical conditions, actually prevent people from getting the help that they need. So along with Maria Stonestreet, who my friend introduced me to, who became the executive producer on this film, we raised the funds to make this movie. We assembled our cast, and we made this beautiful film that I'm so excited to share with you this evening. And in it, 10 kids, 2 award-winning journalists, one of whom is with us this evening, Ryan Lefebvre, and one determined mother, bravely share their lives with anxiety and depression in a way that leaves people that watch it, leaves me feeling uplifted, empowered to either live life or lift life up with these often life-threatening conditions. And with that, I think we could go ahead and show the first clip of the film that we've chosen. In this clip, it was important for us to appeal to a wide audience, as young as we could possibly get, and help them understand first what is anxiety and what is sadness, and when does anxiety become an anxiety disorder, and when does sadness become depression. And so we wanted to do that, explain it in as simple of terms as possible, so everyone could walk out of the film or walk away from the film with a clear understanding of what these conditions are. And that's what this first clip is about. And as we progress through the clips, you'll see that there'll be more character development, and you'll get to meet people as we go along. So thank you again for sharing this time with us.
If my friends understood what anxiety disorder and depression were, it would make my life easier.
The first way you can be a good friend to someone living with an anxiety disorder and depression
is to learn what they are.
So let's talk about it.
What exactly is anxiety?
A big turning point for me was when I discovered there was a difference between normal anxiety that helps us and an anxiety disorder that hurts us.
The right amount of anxiety is great. Human beings need it to keep us safe. It's similar to a reflex. We can't control it. It just happens, like coughing or sneezing. Coughing is what our body does when we breathe in something that is dangerous to our lungs. Anxiety is what our body does when we step into a situation that is dangerous to us.
Anxiety is like our body's fire alarm. It tells us we are in danger and we need to act fast.
A simple way to think about it is to imagine if you were walking in the jungle and saw a tiger. Anxiety would kick in to help you fight the tiger off, flee from the tiger, or it helps you freeze and be very still so the tiger won't see you.
It takes a lot of energy to fight off a tiger.
And it's anxiety's job to give us that energy. Everyone has anxiety.
I need anxiety.
I need anxiety.
So do I. And so do you.
Normal anxiety is different than an anxiety disorder.
After 26 years of announcing Major League Baseball, I still feel anxious before a broadcast. But that type of anxiety actually helps me. It fuels me and helps me focus and prepare so I can do my best.
Anxiety sends a rush of adrenaline and other chemicals to help us react with the strength and quickness we need to get away from danger. It's like rocket fuel pumping through your body.
Another turning point for me in my journey was when I realized that the human instinct to cry and sadness can actually be healthy.
The right amount of sadness is not a bad thing. It's actually great for us.
Everyone feels sad sometimes. I know I do.
Sometimes I feel sad.
Me too.
We all live with sadness.
Like anxiety, sadness has an evolutionary purpose for human beings.
While anxiety drives us away from people, places, or things that are bad for us, sadness draws us nearer to and helps us remember the people, places, or things that we care about.
A simple way to think about it is to remember when we were babies and we needed our caregivers for our survival. Our bodies were programmed to feel sadness when our caregivers, like our mom, dad, or grandparents, left us. our mom, dad, grandparent, or caregiver would hear our cries and come back to us and give us the care we needed to be healthy and strong. The sadness kept us safe.
When we grow up, we still need care from others to be healthy and strong.
When Braden moved to Florida, it made me really sad. It felt like I lost my best friend. We started hanging out a lot more in the summer. But my sadness reminds me to call him and to talk to him. It keeps us close, and his support makes me healthy and strong.
So Jen, I really like the mix of characters you've included in the film and also animation to explain some of these concepts. And watching the whole film, I really got attached to the characters. I'll bet that some of our guests right now are wondering, you've introduced that normal levels of anxiety and sadness are healthy. How do we know when our anxiety and sadness are healthy? What's the right amount?
I am definitely not a psychologist or psychiatrist, so I hesitate to, speak with authority on the matter, but I can just kind of speak to what I learned, talking to the kids and talking to professionals and talking to Ryan and Abby. And my understanding is that when anxiety prevents us from doing things that we really want to do, like I would do that, but for the fact that I'm anxious, that's when it becomes a disorder. And I think also the same is true with sadness. When it becomes so all-consuming that it prevents us from leading the life that we want to lead, that's my understanding of when it becomes a medical condition.
And I would agree with that assessment as well. From a clinical perspective, it's about how productive is it. Ryan mentioned that Ryan, you mentioned you use your anxiety to help you focus. What are some of the ways you use it to get ready for a broadcast?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dr. Gillis. I think before I was a broadcaster, I was an athlete, and I learned to use being nervous as a way to prepare. I didn't want to fail. So the anxiety helped me to prepare, it helped me to focus. And then that prepared me quite a bit when I got into a broadcasting career. When I realized that my anxiety was a problem, somebody once told me that anxiety, or I guess an anxiety disorder, is unproductive mental energy. And so that really resonated with me because going back to that clip of the film, I mean, there are moments where anxiety was was productive for me as an athlete and in my profession. But when I started to look at it being a disorder, the things that I was worrying about, the things that I was constantly thinking about, did not draw a parallel to what was actually going on in my life. And I remember my counselor used to talk a lot about, when we first started meeting at the very beginning, when I was just in pieces and we were just trying to put the pieces back one at a time, is that we would discuss how I was feeling, compare that to what was actually going on in my life. And she helped me realize that the difference between feeling depressed because of my life circumstance was normal, but being depressed meant that there was an incongruency with my behavior as it related to my life. I was grieving things that weren't really happening in my life. So those two were turning points for me to be able to separate what was normal and what was abnormal. And I think, doctor, it was even more important for me as I started to get better, that when I did experience some anxiety and feeling depressed, that I didn't convince myself that I was backsliding back to the very beginning again.
That is so powerful. And I like that you both have mentioned things that are good checks for whether our anxiety and sadness are normal. So for instance, for anxiety, is it productive or unproductive? You mentioned planning. It takes anxiety helps you plan better. And so when I'm treating patients with medication, for instance, I will tell them, I don't want to overtreat it. I don't want to take away all of your anxiety, because anxiety can be helpful. Evolutionarily, we're programmed to have anxiety to help us run from predators, just like you mentioned in your film, Jen. And so we want some of that to help us survive. We can't survive without anxiety. And then in terms of sadness, I like how the film describes sadness as a social signal. It reminds us to reach out. It says, I need support, I need connection. And so I really like that you mentioned that, you know, there are normal levels and then there are abnormal levels, and you can check in with people to, you know, to determine if you're experiencing a normal level of anxiety or is it abnormal. So I really like that about the film.
And I was really surprised to hear from Dr. Matu that he actually treats some patients for having not enough anxiety. So that really brought that home to me, that anxiety can be normal and productive. And so I'm getting the high sign that it's time to go on to the next clip, and just to kind of introduce the clip. I think a lot of people are reluctant to talk about their journeys with anxiety disorder and depression because they're afraid that it might impact their lives negatively. So we wanted to take that on head on in the movie. And so this clip kind of speaks to that.
Looking back, I believe that he didn't feel that he was being heard. I was just very tired. I really felt like I was failing as a parent, that God hadn't equipped me with the right tools to be able to parent him. And it really was at the point that I was thinking that maybe he would be better off parented by his grandparents or his father.
Another stigma around mental health is that talking about anxiety disorders and depression will make these conditions worse. Especially talking about suicide or even saying the word will make it more likely to happen.
I thought if I talked about suicide, it might possibly cause it to actually happen.
But talking won't make things worse or suicide more likely. The truth is that talking is one of the most powerful ways to feel better.
I realized that you need somebody there to help you, to talk to, like you have to talk with them and get them through it calmly. You can't just scream at them, yell at them, or say hurtful things, even if you don't even mean them. I would just say, Rashawn, I'm sitting here right with you no matter what. And you already know if you call me for anything, I'll be there for you. If you need me for anything or you need talk or anything, whatever you gotta do, just know I'm gonna be there for you. And then usually I'll just give him a hug and hold him until he relaxes.
When my anxiety hits me, it helps to know that Mac is open to talking to me about it, that I can tell him anything. And he will try his best to give me good advice no matter what I'm going through.
When Dylan is having anxiety, I am there for him and really listen.
So there was a turning point in my recovery, and I was interviewed for a story in the Kansas City Star. And the writer, Jeff Passan, and I were sitting in a restaurant. And after some small talk, he took his recorder and he put it on the table and he hit record. And his question was, so who is Ryan Lefebvre? And I had a choice to make. I could talk about Ryan Lefebvre, the Major League broadcaster, Ryan Lefebvre, the former college athlete, like I'd answered dozens of interviews before that. Or I could take this opportunity and share who I really was and what was going on in my life. And I chose the latter. And it was at a time when men really weren't talking a whole lot about depression. We do everything we can to avoid talking about it. I felt like it was almost a whisper from God saying, here you go, here's your chance. And I told him everything that had happened to me, everything I was going through, and the response was overwhelming. And I still, to this day, get letters from complete strangers just thanking me for telling my story.
If you're worried about your friend, it's important that you talk to them and ask them if they're okay. Ask them if they're having thoughts of hurting themselves. Talking to them won't make the situation worse. It just makes it easier for them to talk about their pain.
So I think that there is a stigma in regards to talking about anxiety disorder and depression, what people will think, or people don't really understand it. People don't even really believe that it's a real thing, and the last thing they want is for somebody to tell them that their feelings aren't valid.
So the stigma prevents people from just starting. But when we begin the journey and we allow ourselves to be influenced by people who can really help us, that's when the healing begins.
I think too many people think we shouldn't talk about it, but I think they're wrong. The more we talk about these things, the easier it is to understand.
So Ryan, I really admire the courage you have in telling your story in this film and beyond. And Jen, all of the teens who were brave enough to come forward for your film and share their authentic stories. I'm curious, and I bet our guests are curious too, Ryan, how did you come to the decision to just show who you were authentically?
Well, let me see if I can sum that up very quickly for you. I think as I embraced my depression and I began to realize how it manifested itself in my life. At that time, I was in my mid-30s, and I look back on how it manifested in my life in my teenage years and my 20s. I began to realize that while it wasn't labeled depression, this was going on all around me. And I was seeing other men who just didn't talk much about what was going on in their life, and they would just throw themselves into their work or exercising or gambling or pornography or alcohol or drugs or whatever, but they wouldn't go there. And so I realized that I had a very unique platform. And I truly felt like it was a whisper from God that was like, look, man, I didn't put you here just to call baseball games. Okay. There's a greater purpose here, and we walk through this thing together. Now, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to use it for yourself, or are you going to share it with others? And so when I shared that, I knew that there was going to be a reaction, just because there weren't many men talking about depression. But I'll say this, Dr. Gillis, and you know this a lot better than I do, but after a while, it becomes easier to speak about it to a group. The thing to do now on social media is for someone to post how they're feeling on social media, and all these so-called friends are responding, hey, we're pulling for you and all that. Sometimes I think it's a lot harder to just be one-on-one with somebody, a close friend, and wonder if this is going to change your relationship. And so these kids in this film that are speaking about this for the first time, my story came out in 2006. So I've been talking about this for a long time. But these kids in this film that talk about it for the first time, and you get to learn about the friend that walks alongside them and how they learned about depression and how they learned to communicate. To me, that's so much more courageous than an old guy who has a high profile job and there's a certain amount of people that are going to accept whatever I do just because of the job that I have. But circling back to your original question, I realized that there were other men out there that might use my story and it would help them with theirs.
Thank you. That is so powerful. And you're so right. I see people one-on-one, and a common theme is everyone feels like they're suffering alone. They're suffering in silence, and they do wish that they could be more authentic with the people closest to them and tell the things that I hear and that other providers hear. So I really do like about the film too, that Jen, that you host not just the teens, but their friends, and their friends get to talk about what it's like to support someone with anxiety and depression. I think that is a huge part of the film that I haven't seen in other areas. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, absolutely. I think I learned so much. One big piece for me was that I have friends that live with anxiety and depression, and sometimes they won't respond to me, or they'll just kind of fall away. And I took it personally, or I thought they were mad at me. And that would be my first question. Hey, is everything okay between us? And I learned, through Ryan and Abby and the kids, that that's like the last thing that you want to hear when you are trying to get through something and it's so hard. You just want to be accepted and loved. And I learned, because, Maria Stone Street lives with anxiety and depression. I learned, just how to respond. I need those pragmatic tools. I think people need those pragmatic tools. Tell me what to say, because people want to be supportive and helpful.
Absolutely. I think a key thing is, you don't have to worry so much about finding the right words to say. The person who you're listening to is not judging what you're going to say next. They really want to be listened to, and they want to be heard, and they want their experience to be validated as a human experience. That as humans, yes, we experience anxiety and sadness. And sometimes as humans, we also develop anxiety disorders and depression. And it's okay to talk about it with friends and family. Being treated with your community and having access to your community is so critical. And so we need more listeners. We don't necessarily need people who say the right things. I've been doing this for several years. I don't always have the right things to say. Sometimes I ask questions in an awkward way, and I've been asking questions for years now. So even if you're a trained professional, you don't have it down perfectly, and that's not what your loved one is looking for anyways. They're not looking for someone to perfectly say the right things to magically make these things go away. They really want to be heard and understood.
Yeah, and doctor, I'll just add to that for many people, the cure is more painful than the disease. And just like in that clip, there are a lot of well-meaning people that say, hey, you've got a lot to live for in your life. You should be positive, or you should read this book, or I know this person that you should talk to. And I think we all struggle in life when tragedy or adversity comes. What do we say? I don't know. People say, I don't know what to say. But what I've learned, what the people did for me, doctor, and what I try and be now for others, is just sitting there and just asking people how they feel and just let them unload how they feel, just giving their depression a voice. That was a big deal for me. I mean, someone once told me depression is anger turned inward. And when I got to take my anger and just whatever feeling, as irrational as it was, and just give it a voice and just get it out, and someone on the other end was just nodding their head, whether they agreed with me or not. Oh my gosh, that was so therapeutic.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we're going on to the next clip.
Yes. And I guess, we'll just go ahead and start this clip. And it's about suicide, which, just like everyone, and that I felt like if I said the word, or if I talked about suicide, that it would make it more likely to happen. So that we thought it was very, very important to make sure that the audience understood that it is okay to say the word suicide. It is okay to ask your loved one that lives with anxiety and depression, are they having thoughts of suicide? And so this is what that clip will refer to.
The right amount of anxiety helps us react quickly and get out of danger. But too much anxiety can be uncomfortable and may even hurt us. Too much or excessive anxiety is called an anxiety disorder.
And they can be very serious.
Even though kids living with an anxiety disorder and depression may be working hard to manage them, just like with any other medical condition like asthma or the flu, they can worsen and become extremely severe, even life-threatening.
When my depression hits, it takes me over. It takes over everything. Winter comes and makes us cold, but you were supposed to keep me warm. It's like I am drowning and everyone's telling me I am not. That I'm fine, I'm okay, but I know I am not. The color gray don't seem to talk, but I'm shadow blind. It even stops me from making music because I feel like I don't have a voice. I lose motivation. to leave the house, and to even live.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, nearly 1 in 6 high school students has seriously considered suicide, and 1 in 12 have attempted suicide.
Like with Pearson, his anxiety disorder and depression were just too much.
His anxiety disorder and depression became so severe that he died by suicide before filming began. Pearson was a brave advocate for educating people about life with anxiety disorders and depression. He was one of the first kids to join this film project and even help raise money for it.
Hi, I'm Pearson.
Understand, this is an illness. It's not something that I can just stop.
I live with anxiety and depression. My parents are great, and they support me in being open about my anxiety and depression. They say they never want me to be ashamed of who I am. And guess what? I'm not.
While there are ways to treat and manage anxiety disorders and depression, right now, there is no cure.
Although doctors and scientists are working hard to figure them out, right now, there is no cure for anxiety disorders or depression.
One thing that's important to know about anxiety and depression is that the person living with them can't control whether, how, when, or why they have them. They just have them, just like we have any other bodily reflex or medical condition.
Part of the stigma around anxiety disorders and depression is that people think you should be able to just shake it off or get over it. And I know I thought that.
Before I understood what anxiety and depression was, I just really saw Rashawn as a disobedient young man who just didn't have a level of respect that I thought he should have. And we argued quite a bit and bumped heads.
We used to get in like a lot of fights. His emotions would start to work up really high. He won't stop. His body just keeps going and going.
I would just be like, stop. Get it under control. What's wrong with you? Go to your room.
Stop being a little baby.
Calm down.
You're not gonna talk to me like that. You better learn who you're talking to.
I wasn't able to just get over it. I was battling with emotions with myself.
In everything else in life, if something isn't working for us, we just need to try harder. Or we need more information, or somehow we can use our willpower to improve our situation. And unfortunately, that doesn't work with depression. And depression and anxiety requires a surrendering and realizing that it doesn't have anything to do with our willpower and that we have a medical condition.
This segment was definitely powerful. There's a lot in there. I want to go straight to suicide though, because that's what this segment was about, and what we hope to achieve. And people seeing the film is that they treat anxiety and depression and manage it before it gets to that point. What do you think in your, making this film about this notion of my child is just disobedient, disrespectful, versus maybe my child is in distress?
I think that I had that experience personally as a parent, and that's the way that I was raised. If I was crying too much, it's, suck it up or get it together. But I had the experience also as a parent when that doesn't work, and that just escalates the situation. And that was my clear indication that it was time to get help. But I think that's a very, very common thing for parents to believe, that that a child that is highly emotional and there's a lot of conflict, which I think is normal in some ways in parenting, to push the boundaries. Yeah, when is that threshold? When you cross that threshold to where it becomes, I think the same is true as we discussed earlier, when it becomes a disorder, when you can't function, when it impedes your ability to function, is kind of where I landed with that. But again, I'm not a professional. I'm just kind of going with what I learned. in my own experiences as a parent, and then talking with everyone in this film.
Your lived experience and also the experience of the people in this film is very important. And so I definitely want to honor that. And I want to say too that, parents on the flip side of that may say, but we have to have boundaries for our kids and they can't use disrespectful language at home. So how do I manage, a kid who may be in emotional distress, but is speaking very disrespectfully? And I would say that's when it's time to seek outside help in the form of family therapy or getting a therapist for the kid or your own therapist to help you know the difference. Ryan, do you have experience maybe having people talk to you about suicide, or you talking about any dark thoughts that you've had?
Yeah, and I'll just speak to my own experience during my time. My story really comes to a head in the summer of 2005, and I wrote a book about that experience. I mean, that's when I really fell so low that I realized I couldn't manage this on my own, and I needed to get some professional help. And so the suicidal thoughts that I had were from a lack of hope. I mean, I remember when I started medication that people were telling me it takes about a month for this to kick in. And I remember it was 1 month and 1 day, and I was in Toronto and I wasn't feeling any better. Maybe I even felt worse at that time. And so I thought, what happens if I don't get any better? I mean, what if this is it? I mean, I'm going to counseling, I'm taking medication, and but what I ended up arriving at, and the same for me, I'm 24 years sober, and when I quit drinking for the third time, which was the last time, I needed some accountability. And this may not be very mainstream, but what helped me was there's such a focus now, I believe, on like self-esteem, and you need to do this for you, and this is all about you, this is all about you, you got to do it for you. Well, what happens if you don't like you, right? What if you don't think you is worth the fight? And so what I had to do is I had to look outward and, who am I doing this for? And when I started taking care of my mental health, it was at the beginning, it was for the people around me because I didn't care enough about myself. And so I had to look outward and I had to think about other people before I thought about myself. And then over time, when I began to feel better, I was able to use that for myself. And so, but I remember those serious suicidal thoughts 1 month and 1 day after the medication, not so far as to plan it, but thinking, okay, well, if this doesn't work, I mean, I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling that way. But then I realized that I had a unique platform, and I didn't know what that looked like, but I thought, if I can get through this and this can be used somehow, then maybe that would be a good thing. So that's what, when I didn't think I was going to get any better, that's how I pressed on. How can I do this to serve other people? And I never thought it would turn out to be the way that it did. But so that might be a little against today's, self-absorbed, self-esteem, mainstream way of thinking. But I think it's okay to do some things to help ourselves while we're thinking about other people as well.
Thank you for sharing that. That your experience is actually very common. And I'll just say this quickly, that when I assess for suicidal thoughts and I ask what is preventing the person from actually following through on any plans, the number one reason is family. It's family. I don't want to hurt my mom. They are outward looking, which is what you wouldn't think. And then as they start to get better, the self-esteem does improve and they start to take care of themselves for themselves. So your experience is very common. So thank you for making that real and sharing it.
Good. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, and I can say you're doing it. You're doing it. You're sharing your story has already impacted so many, and we're all so grateful. Especially important as a male. And I think it's time to go to the next clip. So we really, in this film, we wanted to make sure that we didn't just tell the tragedy of anxiety disorder and depression and how hard it is and how prevalent it is and how devastating it can be. We wanted to give our audience real tools that they could take with them to not only live their lives with anxiety disorder and depression in a healthier way, happier way, but also support those around them that live with anxiety disorder and depression. And this clip is a clip where we talk about ways to help someone who is having thoughts of suicide.
My viewpoint on anxiety disorder and depression changed after our visit to the emergency room once I realized the severity of it. We were sitting around, Braden was home.
And my brother thought I was being disrespectful and was saying, "Do not talk to my mom like that." And then I got angry and I felt like my mom always sided with my brother.
He said it again, that he wished he wasn't here and that he just wished his life could end.
That he hated himself and he wanted to die.
My mother told me if he were to say that again, that we was gonna take him to the hospital. I think that he thought maybe she was playing, but since I was there, I said, this is not normal. I grabbed him up and I hugged him super, super tight.
I was hysterical and my brother had picked me up.
Braden just snatched him up, threw him over his shoulder, put him in the car, and we drove him to the emergency room.
That me squeezing him nice and tight showed him how much I really loved him. And then I just kind of feel like that feeling translated into him.
Braden was crying, I was crying. It was an extremely emotional experience.
That's when I really realized I had a problem when I was faced with having to answer their questions.
What I did learn was he had a plan.
That I contemplated my death.
He was like, "I'll just take a whole bunch of pills and go to sleep and it'll be easy."
He would OD on pills.
Taking a bottle of pills after school and going home and hoping that I wouldn't wake up.
It was the first time that Rashawn had really opened up about his depression.
And if an episode of depression goes on for too long, becomes too serious, or if your friend mentions having thoughts of harming themselves or taking their own life, it is vitally important that you take action right away. Trust your instincts.
No one expects you to be their therapist. Talk to an adult that you trust for advice or help dealing with it. It can be your parents, your friend's parents, a teacher, counselor, coach, an older brother, older sister, or your doctor.
You can call my parents.
Talk to my teacher.
Because I need help, and I may be too afraid to ask for it.
And if you're hesitating because you're worried that your friend might be mad at you, don't.
Don't hesitate, because your friend's life is on the line.
Because my life is on the line.
And although I might be upset with you temporarily, I will forever be grateful to you for allowing me to continue to live this life and be your friend.
To be strong and healthy.
How I feel about Braden in regards to how he responded in the moment his brother needed him is forever grateful. He was really able to step up and be the voice of reason. He just really took immediate action, and it was really the turning point for Rashawn.
As soon as he said that, I was like, I can't lose my brother. He already said it once, so it's not something that you need to just throw over your shoulder. If I just threw that over my shoulder and looked the other way and didn't think about it, and then the next day I woke up to a phone call saying my brother was dead, that would destroy me.
So if you think your friend or classmate is in danger of hurting themselves, act quickly.
You can even call a suicide hotline or 911. If your gut is telling you it is the right thing to do it.
You may help save your friend's life.
I want Dylan around for a long time.
I need Allie in my life.
I don't know what I would do without Morgan.
When I needed help, my mom was there for me.
Michael helps me understand that depression is not my fault, and it doesn't make me weak.
Just like it's not my fault
It's not my fault when my body reacts.
When my body reacts to an illness with too much coughing.
It's not my fault when my body reacts to a stressful situation with too much anxiety.
Just like it's not my fault when my stomach growls super loudly or I sneeze a lot.
It doesn't mean I'm weaker than anyone else.
It's just the way my body works.
There are many incredible parts to Morgan, and depression is just one of them.
It's just one part of who I am.
It's just one part of my amazing friend Jaina.
I really like the parallels that this film brings between mental illness and medical illness. And in this segment in particular, I just want to draw a connection between the strategy that Roshan's mother used when he was expressing that he was suicidal. She didn't just dismiss him. She let him know, I hear you. And if you really feel this way, if you say it again, we're going to go get help. And then she followed through on it. That's so important for kids to hear. And the parallel I want to draw is if your kid was experiencing an asthma attack or something, really extreme in their medical illness, we wouldn't say it's just an idiom of distress and ignore it as an attention-getting measure. And so when I'm practicing with parents, I tell them, yes, let them know this is what happens when we say this is actually a really serious thing. We have to get help. I have to get you help. And then you follow through on that. And I just want to add one little bit that just to reassure parents that when you get your kid help, there's a relief that happens. I evaluate kids in the ER for suicidal thoughts. I evaluate kids in the inpatient unit. None of those kids are mad. They're not mad that their parents brought them. They are relieved that they're finally getting help, that someone heard them. And so I want to bring that reassurance to parents, but also check in with the two of you about your thoughts about this segment and kind of, what stood out for the both of you.
Should I start, Jen? I think as a male, when my depression got really bad, I thought it was just a matter of my willpower. I thought I was weak. I'd accomplished a lot, if not most of what I set out to accomplish. And so if I had done all these things, how come I still feel the way that I feel? And what's left? I mean, there's really nothing left on the list. So I blamed myself. The young men and women in the film saying it's not your fault when you have anxiety disorder, you have depression. But I was out to dinner in the middle of the baseball season. We were in New York, and I had my first panic attack, and I never really knew what that meant until I had it. And prior to that, I was having trouble sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, sweating. My heart was racing sometimes. I don't know what it is about anxiety and depression, but like there's this natural alarm clock at 5 a.m. every day that just, I just woke up. But I was out to dinner and I started to have the panic attack at dinner, and the restaurant just seemed so loud. I mean, it felt like everybody was screaming and the music was too loud. And I excused myself from the table and I went to the bathroom, and like a scene out of a movie, I'm splashing water on my face and just trying to shake myself out of this. And I'm just sweating like crazy. I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. And when I went back to the hotel that night, I felt like, maybe there's something medically wrong with me. And that's when I went to a doctor for the first time. I went to a medical doctor, and that was a big deal for me. But I had to convince myself that it was a medical condition because I thought it was I was just being weak. And that was a big turning point for me, is when I sat and explained to my doctor what was going on, and he didn't have a shocked look on his face. He just kind of nodded his head, and he wrote me a prescription for Xanax, which was an anti-anxiety medication, and Lexapro, which was an antidepressant medication. And he explained to me when to use them, how long to use them, and whatever. And I remember, like, as you described, Dr. Gillis, when kids show up in the ER that they're relieved, I left that appointment relieved that, maybe I'm going to get better. Maybe this is something that is beyond my control. And I didn't get better right away. It still took a long time after that. But when it became a medical condition for me, or at least partly a medical condition for me, that really changed the way I felt about it.
Yeah, and watching that segment, it just always amazes me that, I teared up again. I have seen every inch of this footage so many times over the last 6 years, but I am just so moved by the bravery and sharing these stories, and by that relationship with Roshan and Braden, and how much he loves his brother, and how much she loves Roshan, of course, and all they wanted to do was help him. And all he wanted was for them to be able to help them and help him. They just needed the right language, and they just needed to hear, from someone like you, doctor, like what to do. And my son had severe asthma from the time he was 4 months old, and it was very clear what to do with his asthma. I had literally a chart that says, if the medicine isn't working, you do this. And if you do that, like step by step by step. I would love to see that created for anxiety and depression. I would love for everyone to be able to feel comfortable going to their doctor, and their doctor to be able to give them a blueprint like this, like what the film is offering for every child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know we have to move on, but I want to provide reassurance that if and when the time comes to take a child to the ER, to present yourself to the ER, that is part of what they do in the ER. Not everyone who goes to the ER with suicidal thoughts gets hospitalized. I know that's a fear. They're going to lock me up. That's not what always happens. And it's not a lot of times the hospitalizations are voluntary. So it's not like locking you up or punishing you. But if, they can also connect you to resources in the community, because maybe you've been having some challenges just trying to get connected with someone in the community. So it's not always 100% you go to the ER, that's it. They're going to lock you up if you say that you don't want to live anymore, if that your child has been saying those things. So that's a way to get help if you haven't been able to get help before then, and you have no one to reach out to. Absolutely.
And now we're going to move on to the next clip, and kind of going back to what I was saying about, providing a blueprint. Like what do I do if I'm living with anxiety and disorder and depression, or I love someone who is? One of the big components of that is recognizing triggers, that there are situations and things that happen that can trigger anxiety disorders and depression, and understanding what those are. And also just the fact that it's okay to get help. It's okay to see a therapist, and kind of trying to do our part in eliminating the stigma, that there is a stigma around going to get help for your anxiety and depression, and what can we do to get rid of that stigma. So that's what this clip is about.
Triggers can be anything, like being around someone who is ill, the end of a relationship, or a frightening news event. And they often change.
Keeping the lines of communication open with your friend will help you understand what causes them to experience too much anxiety, so you can support them.
It's amazing how much a simple text can help.
I really appreciate that McKenna doesn't text me questions that make me feel bad. Like, where have you been? Are you mad at me? Why aren't you talking to me?
I know she isn't feeling well. Just like I wouldn't take it personally if she was home with the flu or allergies. Some things work for some people and not for others. Maybe just ask your friend what you can do to help them feel better.
What makes your anxiety disorder and depression worse?
If someone's talking to your friend and calling them crazy or insane, you should step up and let them know that it's not okay. Help that person understand that anxiety and depression is a real medical condition, just like asthma or the flu.
I'm so grateful somebody helped me understand. Now I try to help others understand it too. Because if we don't work together to get rid of the stigma, it will be hard for children like Roshan to be able to get the help they need.
If I'm ashamed to admit that I have an anxiety disorder and depression, how can I take care of it?
One stigma we need to work hard to eliminate is that if people seek professional help for their mental health, that they will be forever labeled as crazy or have issues, and it will somehow keep them from getting the job they want. I know when I finally saw a doctor, I was literally afraid he was going to put me in a straitjacket and send me to an institution out in the middle of nowhere.
By taking Roshan to get help, I really thought that, if there was a paper trail in regards to his mental health, that it could cause him issues in his future in regards to getting a job or, getting into college. I was always questioning what to do. When in my heart, I knew I needed to get him help. I just lived in this fearful place. I guess I just put it in the category of a criminal record. Now I believe getting Rashawn the help that he needs for his anxiety disorder and depression will provide him a future.
At first, I was afraid to go to a therapist.
I was afraid kids might make fun of me or call me crazy.
But Morgan is not crazy.
And Dylan is anything but weak.
It actually takes an extremely courageous person to seek help from a therapist.
So please don't call people crazy or insane or that they have issues. And that goes for me too. Now I know better.
Stop making people feel bad for taking care of their mental health. Support your friends and family when they're working hard to take care of their mental health. You're gonna make your life better and your family's life better. I've seen that in my own family. It is hard work, but it is worth it.
It actually takes a lot of courage to seek help from a therapist. It can be really hard work and requires you to prioritize your own health and put yourself first.
I believe by getting help, it makes you more reliable, qualified, and productive for jobs. I know a lot of parents think that if they get help for their kids' mental health, that other parents will think badly of them. I would tell you not to worry about being a bad parent, because your child's mental health is more important than what other people think. Since I've been able to get help for Rashawn's mental health, I feel that more people have come to me in regards to wanting to know how we work through it, and we haven't been judged. Nobody has called me a bad parent since I got Rashawn help. Rashawn has called me a good parent for getting him help.
And what's that mean to you?
The world. I feel that I'm a better parent to Rashawn.
It is so important for people to feel good about going to a therapist. A life-saving step I took when anxiety and depression overwhelmed me was when I finally chose to talk to a therapist.
Anxiety disorders and depression are a medical condition. I don't take Rashawn's pain personally anymore. I just try to be there for him and get him the help that he needs.
And just like I would never make fun of someone with allergies going to see a doctor, I would never make fun of someone living with an anxiety disorder and depression going to see a therapist.
I really admire Jana for having the courage to do what she needs to do to stay well by going to a therapist.
It just makes sense.
I see a therapist too. Everyone gets stressed or sad sometimes. It helps me. I just want to be the healthiest person I can be.
So please help end the stigma.
I did call Rashawn ridiculous because I felt that he was making this up. Please don't make the same mistake I did.
There's one line in that segment that always stands out to me every time I watch it, and that's Rashawn's mother saying that she doesn't take his pain personally anymore. And I have a theory that part of the stigma is it's uncomfortable to talk about these things, it's uncomfortable to hear about it. And so we take our pain, our discomfort, and try to silence other people, sometimes inadvertently, but it's not a reflection on parenting. If your child needs help for anxiety or depression, you're not failing your kid if they need help. You're not failing your loved one if they need help.
Yeah, that's a good reminder for me because I'm a parent now. And so I'm constantly asking myself as a father of 4 at different age groups, what am I seeing now that's normal, and what is something that we need to pay a little bit more attention to?
Yeah, I think that's really important for all parents to hear, that I would never take it personally that my son has asthma. So why do I take it so personally that one of my children can't control their emotions? And why can't I understand that that's a medical condition? And I think that if we can begin to, move these conditions into the category of medical condition, and they're part of every healthy well checkup from the very beginning when you're raising children, and tools are in place from the very beginning, I think that's when we're going to start to see a real shift. But the first step is for people like Ryan and the kids to speak up and tell their stories. And that's what we're doing in this film. So I'm so grateful.
Absolutely. I'm grateful too. Thank you for sharing the stories of these people. Yeah, absolutely. We don't do our brains justice. We're not fair. It's an organ, just like all of our other organs. We take care of our skin. We take care of other organs, our digestive tracts and things like that. But we like to push our brain to the side. We don't want to hear that anyone else's brain is, that they're struggling with a brain disorder. And it's really what it is.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we're running over and we need to hustle to the next clip. And this is kind of just continuing on the path to demonstrate tools to manage life with anxiety disorder and depression.
Anxiety disorders and depression are medical conditions that can become severe, but there are many ways to manage them and live a long, fulfilling life.
And just like when I'm having too much coughing and sneezing,
or allergies,
I go see a doctor.
When I'm having too much anxiety
or depression,
I go see my therapist.
Kids visit a doctor or a therapist like me to help them with their anxiety disorder and depression. I'm kind of like a coach, but instead of coaching kids on their physical skills, I'm coaching them on their mental skills. Instead of teaching kids how to dribble a ball or take a shot on goal, I teach kids how to use breathing techniques and focus their mind. Sometimes we talk in a specific way that is called cognitive behavioral therapy.
I go to a therapist.
I see a therapist.
So do I. It helps a lot.
I also help kids come up with a plan to manage their feelings and thoughts. I teach them relaxation techniques and breathing exercises. I give them powerful tools to help them be courageous in the face of their fears.
I knew that I needed to be able to relate to Rashawn differently and that he needed some additional tools. So he needed a therapist. There was some things that was inside of him that he needed to work through that maybe I didn't have the answers for, and we really just needed to find the professional help to get through it.
My doctor taught me to use breathing exercises when I feel anxious. He taught me to inhale for 8 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds, and prescribed me medication to help handle my depression.
And sometimes doctors prescribe medications to help kids.
Medication helped me manage my anxiety disorder and depression.
It's just like how I have asthma and sometimes I need an inhaler. When you live with an anxiety disorder and depression, sometimes you need medication to make you feel better.
Sometimes my medication changes, and it takes me a while to get used to it. I can be tired and cranky.
It's okay. I understand. It's just what Michael needs to do to take care of himself.
I live with anxiety disorder and depression, but I work every day to manage them through lifestyle choices, treatments, therapy, diet, and exercise.
Just like if you want to run fast, you have to take care of your legs. If you want to be mentally well, you have to take care of your brain. I take care of my brain by going to therapy, feeding it the right foods, listening to great music, giving it rest, praying, and exercising it.
Just like any other kid, I work hard to stay healthy and strong.
I try to eat healthy foods.
Lots of vegetables.
Eating a gluten and egg-free diet helps me manage my anxiety disorder and depression.
I take quiet time for myself.
I make time to meditate, and it helps me.
It actually helps me a lot.
I figured out that doing volunteer work helps me. I love donating my time. It really gives me a sense of purpose.
I spend time with family and friends.
I go outside.
Getting out of my house really helps me.
I love to go on hikes and go hammocking with Allie.
We just hang a hammock and relax in a park.
Ask your friend living with anxiety and depression to go on a walk with you, or go for a drive and talk. It really helps.
Running outside in nature really helps me. Rain or shine, in the cold of winter or the heat of summer, running is my antidepressant.
A lot of my anxiety disorder and depression came from worrying too much about the future. I would tell myself horrible stories about my future, like I will lose my job, I will lose my house, I will lose my relationships, I will die alone with no friends. But my therapist taught me how to bring myself back to the present moment by asking myself the question, is that true? And it almost always wasn't true. So I really work on keeping my thoughts in the present moment.
Doing these things help me with my anxiety disorder.
And my depression.
It helps me to have a list of tools and resources, whether it's in my phone or printed out and hung on the wall. Good food, exercise, outdoors, friends, therapy, whatever helps.
These are things all kids can do to stay healthy and strong, but they especially help kids living with an anxiety disorder and depression manage how much and how often they experience them.
I try to find joy in every day. I have found that laughing with my friends and family is some of the best therapy for me.
What are things that you do that make you feel better?
All right, we're going to jump into the Q&A here. First, I want to thank Jen, Ryan, and Artha for all the information on how we can support young people living with anxiety disorders and depression. And thank you, Jen, for making this film and raising awareness of today's youth mental health crisis. To our audience, you'll be receiving links to the entire film via email. I saw them in the questions. Okay, so first question is from Christine. We see in the media and through personal stories that drugs can be prescribed before other forms of treatment are explored, either from doctors having a financial gain or pharmaceutical companies pushing them. How can parents and individuals avoid these situations?
So I'll definitely answer that question. I practice, based on values. And so the first thing when someone's coming to see me is to find out what type of treatment they're looking for. My job is to give recommendations, not to push pills on people. And so if it's not a part of their values to start with medications, that's not where I'm starting. My job is to give them advisement about what their treatment could look like and what they can expect from the treatment and when to come back if they're not going to start with medication. And when symptoms are mild to moderate, for anxiety and depression, you don't need to necessarily start with medication anyways. And I think a provider you trust is going to tell you that information and honor your values. And so look for providers that really respect your values as a family, as a parent, respects the child's values is what I would say. And you don't have to take prescription just because someone offers it.
And AJ, if I could add to that, for me, I didn't want to go on medication. I really didn't. But the reason that I did go on medication is because it was explained to me by my best friend who was in the pharmaceutical business, that this was temporary relief for me. This was not a cure. And he told me the moment you put this first pill in your mouth, you need to start thinking about when you're going to stop taking these pills. And so I don't know if Dr. Gillis agrees with this or not, but what the medication did for me is it helped me get to a place where I could really absorb what my counselor was saying to me. Before the medication was helping, I would go into a counseling session, feel good for about 5 minutes, and on the drive home, I just felt terrible again because it was like I was like this brick wall and the information was just bouncing off of me. So the medication really helped me calm down to a point where I could think rationally and really absorb what I was learning about myself. And then over time, as I got better, by other things, not relying on the medication, but when I felt like I'd gotten to a place where I was taking good care of myself and I had a handle on it. I wasn't cured from my depression. I've never considered myself cured from it. I still manage it today. But when I felt like I could manage it, then I began to wean myself off of the medication. And I was on it for about 3.5 years.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to move on to Harold's question. He asks, what is the impact of culturally variable responses to some of the examples presented here? So is there a difference with different cultures to what treatment might be?
Well, I can speak to the male culture. if that's one of them there. And that's the most difficult one. Dr. Gillis, I mean, I just had to get past the part that, that I couldn't tough my way through this, and that, and we're supposed to toughen up as men. And I decided I didn't want to be tough anymore. I wanted to be brave. And so the difference is if you think about tough things that are used to protect, like a helmet protects the head because what's inside the helmet is very delicate. An eggshell protects a yolk because the yolk is very delicate. So most of us who are tough are protecting something that's very delicate on the inside. And I realized that I had to stop being tough and I had to be brave. And so for the male culture, for men who are listening now, or maybe have sons who are older and they're maybe caught up in our culture's idea of what being macho is I really had to make a shift from being tough and I can handle this to being vulnerable and being brave. And it was much more empowering being brave than it was trying to be tough.
I would agree with that. Thank you for mentioning the male culture. People have so many different cultures, is why I hesitated to answer. I think a good provider is going to take into account your cultural background and elicit how you experience your culture. There's cultural aspects to stigma. So yes, there's cultural aspects to treatment, and it's about honoring values. I think the film does a really great job of talking about the stigma specifically in BIPOC communities. And so if you see the film in its entirety, it does, address that there are cultural differences and barriers to getting treatment based on one's culture.
All right, and I think this might be our last question here. This is from Karen. When a child talks about hating themselves and feeling stupid, or they feel like they want to die, what are the right things to say and do when listening doesn't seem like it's enough?
That's an important question. I think, you never want to validate those negative thoughts, like the actual thoughts, but that sometimes people do feel that way. And if the child is old enough to tell you, I think it's important to listen what feels helpful. What is helpful that I do? Is there someone you want to be able to talk to? I found that a lot of teens these days, they already know they want to talk to a therapist. And sometimes the parents, don't think that it's quite time for that yet. And so I would say, listen to your kid and find out what they think help looks like and what you do or not do that feels helpful to them. But absolutely, I'm never saying validate that, you're just listening quietly and letting them say they hate themselves and they want to, harm themselves. But you can validate the human experience that sometimes we do feel that way. Or I could understand why you feel that way based on the day you had. And you could also share a different perspective for them to consider.
Yeah, I would add to that too, that I had to learn the difference between facts and feelings. And so when I would speak with my therapist and she would say, how do you feel, or tell me about your life? And I would go on and on with these feelings. And she would say, is that true? And I would say, well, no, I guess it's not true. Okay, so is that true or is that a lie? And so, okay, it's a lie. Okay, well, that's just a feeling. Okay, but the fact is you're not stupid. Why do you feel stupid? Well, because Okay, well, so in other words, I had to shift my paradigm from these thoughts not becoming truths. They were just feelings. Sometimes I feel like fill in the blank, but the fact is I'm not. And so, as Dr. Gillis said a couple segments ago, I mean, it's a language. It's using certain key words so that whether it's a child or an adult can break through the difference between a fact and the feeling. Because the problem is with depression and anxiety, we get caught in the feeling. We can't get out of the feeling. And the quicker we can get back to the fact, that's the only big difference between me now and me back in 2005. I still have the same feelings, but I don't get stuck in the feelings. I know I can pull myself out of the feelings and get to the fact and talk to other people about it. Whereas before, I was like a wash machine that was in the cycle. When your washing machine is bang, 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 what's the lid lifter in my life? How quickly can I get to that wash machine and pull the lid so it slows down, resort the laundry, and then put it back down again?
I love that. I feel like I learned so much today. So thank you guys so much. Thanks again to Jen, Ryan, and Artha. Thank you everyone who tuned in. This program was recorded and we'll post it on the website tomorrow. That's www.friendsofthesemmeleinstitute.org. We look forward to seeing you back on Wednesday, October 12th at 5 p.m. Pacific for a program on men's mental health with Ivan Maisel, author of I Keep Trying to Catch His Eye, and Dr. Michael Gitlin, professor of clinical psychiatry, director of the Adult Division of Psychiatry, and director of the Mood Disorders Clinic at UCLA. Stay safe and have a good night, everyone. Thanks, guys.